Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Security by Default podcast. I'm the host of the show, Joe Carson, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's my favorite time of the week. I get to talk to amazing people and have fun while doing it. And we live in a world of chaos, and what we're really here to try and do is bring clarity and transparency and knowledge to that chaos, so at least we can make informed decisions. And this podcast is really to help you, either educate yourself or choose a career path that will help you do the things you really enjoy doing. And really get connected with people who's making a difference in the industry. And that's really what I try to aspire to do, is bringing people that are really kind of making the world a safer place and really making a difference at the same time as doing it. So I'm welcomed with an amazing guest who I've known for quite a long time. We've crossed paths many times in the past. So Diana, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you on. If you can give the audience just a background, how did you get in the industry? What's your origin story? And a little bit about what you do today.
Thanks so much for having me on. And it's always, it's funny that you say, it's here trying to help people make the world, because that is just so you. That's why it's just been so wonderful to be able to know you and speak with you for so many years, is that you really do. You contribute so much to the industry in just this very humble and helpful and collaborative way. So thank you for all that you do. To me, how did I get started? I mean, if we go way, way back, we got to rewind to the 1970s. I was actually on the DARPANET, and I got really fascinated which was the precursor to the internet. If anybody's like, what's the DARPANET? It was the precursor. And yes, it was the 1970s. And we had email and instant messaging. And I guess I started out my professional career as a sysadmin. And I think I was even at that age, a little sysadmin at heart, because I wanted to know how the systems work. And I couldn't get to the manuals because I didn't have the right access, the right privileges to do it. So I actually figured out that there was a way to get passwords and to see what people were typing in for their password. And I got the password of a Navy commander and got onto one of the .mil sites and was reading the manuals there, which the next morning my dad came into my room, and because I was a kid at the time, my dad came into my room, and I felt bad for him because you could tell that he was very, very angry. I had clearly done something wrong, but also there was this tiny little bit of like, little impressed. So of course the admins had and the systems I had been on had seen what I had done. They realized I had not done harm, but they did say, and so they didn't take my account away. They did allow me to read manuals, but going forward, but they did say if I ever did anything like that again and why it was wrong to steal passwords and all. Obviously you don't have that kind of plausible deniability at this point. But so interestingly, at the same time, the other thing I got to play with that I think is more salient to where I am now, all these many decades later, was there was a piece of software that was developed at MIT by a professor called Joseph Weizenbaum in the 1960s, and it was called ELIZA. And I played with it in the 70s. And ELIZA was one of the first pieces of AI, actually.
AI,
and he, interestingly, it was supposed to emulate talking to a therapist. So there was a lot of like, how does that make you feel?
That's pretty impressive that you got to actually use that software, because I've been reading about it so many times over the years. And it definitely is, a lot of those models was either training simulation models, or it was basically, therapy kind of trying to simulate human behavior. And it was amazing that when we think about, that's 60 years ago.
Yeah, according to lore from what I read, he wrote ELIZA actually as a response to the AI conference that went on in my state here of New Hampshire at Dartmouth in the 50s, and a lot of futurists were saying AI is going to replace human beings. Does this sound familiar, anybody? AI is going to replace human beings, and we're not going to need to have, there's going to be basically, everything's going to be controlled by the machines. And Weizenbaum said AI isn't quite like that, and people may misunderstand what this technology does. So he created ELIZA partly to help people understand the illusion of intelligence, but not real intelligence. But it ended up, a lot of people thought it was true. ELIZA was truly intelligent. So I didn't do a lot formally. So there's a gap of me going into IT and security and being an IT person and securing systems and network and cloud, and pop stack back to around 2013, 14. And I was at IBM, and IBM had Watson, which, do you remember Watson beat Jeopardy? And that was
I remember all that. That was impressive. But when you think about it, it's very logical. because that's what it's been trained to do. When you go through the machine learning and all of the aspects and the algorithms, that you put the guardrails in place to give it that goal. But that's when we kind of, for humans to be able to do that, we're unpredictable. We got frontal cortex, which makes us, look concentration, and we got many goals that to be very focused on those. It's sometimes it's hard to compare, a human versus machine when it's so targeted to do those tasks. But it was amazing to watch, and we also saw the AlphaGo, and we saw, the chess and all of those, many things has been played out over the years. So it's also amazing that you got to play with Watson as well. Which is impressive.
Well, and you're exactly right that it was trained to be, because Jeopardy asks questions or gives answers in a very specific way, and it's sort of and training the machine learning and Watson to get the right. So interestingly, this is kind of a fun thing. Watson wasn't actually faster or better at coming up with the answers than the humans. It didn't beat the humans on actual answer. Where it beat the humans is that Watson didn't have the buzzer. That's where the humans. So looking back on it, it was apparently it was the button, because Watson just had sort of, flipped a bit. It was just like ready, right? Whereas the humans had to. So Watson was able to beat the humans on the speed, because it was our thumbs sort of that slowed. So it wasn't our brains, which is sort of amazing.
Yes. Which is going to be impressive, because when I think about, I read the book about the Battle of the Brain, which is also then about talking about, potentially the future. And I did a TEDx talk 11 years ago. I got reminded of it just recently, which is all about, the moving to the world of augmented reality, and that our traditional way that we interact with the computers through mouse and keyboard is going to completely change, especially with voice. And then if you get connected directly, if you've got a neural chip, then that speed completely changes. Or the human interaction between us and computers will completely evolve. And I think that's the next big wave of innovation, is how do we make us move at computer speed with our decision making, not have to rely on our thumbs and fingers.
Exactly. How can we get, because the speed is very fast. I mean, even to the point that there's been, neuroscientists think that we make a decision before we can actually understand that we've made a decision, and then we start to use language to rationalize why that, but that it had already. So the speed that things happen within us is just amazing. But so anyway, so we had Watson, and Watson was being used for healthcare, and I was in IBM security, or else would I have been. And we decided to train Watson for cyber. And that was a really fascinating experience, because there was, understanding words, and Watson not being able to put context around it, which is, or have the right attention, right? It's almost like if you think about the time, and what happened in 2017, what switched between Watson and Gen AI now, because where Watson would run into trouble is something like IP. Does that mean intellectual property, or does it mean internet protocol, or, salt the hash? Are we talking about cryptography, or are we talking about breakfast, or honeypot? Honeypot was another one where Watson, really wanted Winnie the Pooh to be going up for that honeypot and to explain what a honeypot or honey nut. So these interesting, and I kept thinking at the time, which ended up being, I thought it was like really kind of naive, and because I'm not a data scientist, but when you look at what transformers are, which was looking at the context and the closeness to things that are nearby those words, so that you can get attention on and start to really understand a little bit more about, is this IP intellectual property, or is it IP internet protocol? And that actually is a lot of what happened with what changed, what transformed with transformers, and how we got from Watson to ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot. So I feel pretty lucky to have been in and around it. I worked at Microsoft, where I again was very interested in AI and what was happening with AI in the team, and then ultimately went on to be the CISO at Protect AI. I also did the first AI security course for LinkedIn Learning, which was an absolute blast. I based it on a lot of the research from Ram Shankar from Microsoft. But so I've been really lucky to have been around this and near AI for a long time. And now I am the CISO at Noma Security, which is an AI agentic AI security company.
Fantastic. I mean, that's impressive to see that evolution of AI throughout the years. Because a lot of people's coming on the end of it with the last
Yeah.
5 years, and they're really jumping on, and I think there's a lot of assumptions and misunderstanding and interpretations about what it can do, about how to get value out of it, what the risks are, and I think when you really look at the evolution, I always like to go back and understand about what decisions do we make at the time. Why did people, come up with ELIZA? Why did, we do
Yeah.
Watson? What was all the kind of evolutions throughout that? And a lot of times when you go back, you start seeing the path itself and the decision making and about the improvements and the major evolution, things like the natural language processing and understanding. I think that was the pinnacle kind of massive ability for us to with an AI algorithm in our language.
Yes.
And that's a massive difference. And I think that's sometimes a bit of the concern as well. Because I
Right.
remember I was actually on a panel just recently, and we went through this whole discussion. It was about that we try to make AI we try to make it human-like. By
Yes.
giving it a human voice, and sometimes if we make it a robot, we try to make it look like a human in a robot style, and that gives us this
Right.
misinterpretation, and we start treating it as if it is human and as if it
Yeah.
is intellect and has a frontal cortex and has context aware and can have creativity. But it doesn't. It's based on maths. It's based on algorithms. It's based on machine learning. It's a probability machine, and all those things
Exactly.
mixed together. And I think we really need to make sure. My always question is should we have a prerequisite for people can actually start using AI models? To make sure that they understand that this is not a human. Don't thank it, because you're going to cost it tons of tokens by just saying thank you. And really thinking
Which
about,
is true. Yeah.
what the cost,
Was
the
it
energy cost. Yeah.
Modi said that? Yeah.
It was the energy costs was just phenomenal
Yeah.
by just humans, thanking it, because we think that if we're polite, it remembers that. So the next time we ask it a question in the future, it will actually be kind to do it for us. That we're always afraid that it might come up and say no, no, I'm not doing that because you weren't kind the last time. So it's interesting about our perception with it. So tell me,
Yeah.
in recent years, what have you seen? I mean, we've come a long way, especially with natural language processing, understanding a lot of the GPT models, the evolution we've seen with coding, with ability to make genealogy, and there's so much things that AI is getting involved into, and there is that fear that it will take our jobs and replace us. And I don't believe. I mean, I still have positive outlooks that it's there to empower us. It's to help us go faster and do things and maybe focus on the things that we can enjoy and spend the time on. What's your perception on all of that? There's a lot of the technology evolution and innovation, which is amazing, both in the good and the bad, because all things can be used for both good and bad.
Right.
What's the things that you've seen in the last couple of years that's really been exciting, but also concerning? And do you think it's going to take our jobs? There's another question.
I loved what you said about should people have to take some training and before they start using the AI, because it is true that they've been trained. The AI have been trained to interact with us like we're humans, and you sort of have to look no farther than. Did you see when the Claude code? There was some source leak, open source code leak.
Yes.
Of some Claude code, right? And it turned out that they were using regular expressions to parse out sentiment before sending information into the context window. And people were like, "Why would you use regex?" And it's like, well, because it's better than using inference to find. But you could see from the actual, words that were in there that people were clearly getting upset with Claude and saying things like, "You're terrible" and "You're shitty." Like, it was just sort of fun because you sort of saw this microcosm of how people were clearly getting upset with the AI and swearing at it, and that's what that regular expression set was looking for. But what are some of the biggest changes? I think these models, and I loved how you were saying, they're not intelligent. They don't, quote, learn the way humans do. We train them. They're prediction machines. We're getting a lot better at training them to do what it is we want them to do. And one thing that's shifted a lot, and you'll hear like, oh, it's such a powerful model and it's so much smarter. But what's really shifted, especially if you look in the software development, is how we've trained, what we've trained these models on, especially around what came about initially as chain of thought prompting. So to try and get the model to solve a problem rather than to just know the answer, because that was tradition. You look back at Watson, and it was like at that point, it was, here's Wikipedia. learn Wikipedia, then probably you've got all of the questions for thinking about it. For example, like chain of thought was sort of the walk through, and we talk about quote reasoning, but really it's that these models are now being trained on how do you break down a problem. So instead of just having like 9 times 9, 81, right? And then so memorize the multiplication table. Don't just memorize the multiplication table. And that's sort of how we were training originally, is just have all the knowledge and you should be able to,
Yes.
quote, solve the problem. But it's, okay, if you have 9 times 9, understand how to do location. You know, what are 9 nines, right? Like that's how stepping them through, you know, with like a word problems for math. You know, if you have 3 bushels of apples and there are 4 apples in each one, actually doing this chain of thought prompting, but now they're doing it in the training so that the models are much more likely to be able to, quote, to break down, you know, instead of the problem and do, quote, reasoning through it, which has been really powerful for a couple of things, for some research. Anybody who's used a model and sees it start to say, you can see it, quote, thinking, right? And what it's really doing is it's now being taught on how to do this chain of thought, how to break down the problem. And then where that's really been incredibly powerful is in software development. And it really improved the capability of these models to write software and to also test for flaws and vulnerabilities and issues in the software, which has now led us to this latest model of Anthropics that they're not even releasing, with sort of quite the name there, Mythos. You know, I mean, like there's feels like a little marketing involved with that, but okay. So this model, they're not even releasing out to the wild yet. It's in preview now with a consortium of organizations like AWS and Microsoft and Google and CrowdStrike, who've agreed to look and understand the capabilities so that when it is released, that some of this power of being able to find vulnerabilities in software and vulnerabilities in systems will not lead to a more insecure state on the internet.
We're back in the vulnerability disclosure discussion again. Because ultimately, I mean, we've always been doing this, you know, over from a long time. And finally, we now have a proper, will these algorithms and, you know, models adhere to vulnerability disclosure processes that companies are actually putting on their sites? Will it read and be able to say, okay, I'm going to adhere to their policy disclosure. I will make their vulnerability disclosure to them, and will it follow those processes, you know, that we've set, and we've got their guidelines and best practices that we've done for a long time. And this was one of the things that, you know, was the highlight, I think, recently at the RSAC conference when I went to B-Sides and listened to Katie's talk, that if we take that model and we point it to all the old code and legacy code that's been written since the 60s, and we'll find tons of vulnerabilities, but there's no one here to fix it. I mean, how do we fix, you know, old stuff that, you know, unless I think the good thing with Anthropic is that they're doing it much slower, because it used to be that it was a race, release, and then fix later. Now it's kind of like, oh, maybe this one's a bit too risky to make it public.
Too good at that task.
Yeah, let's think this through and make sure that we get additional, you know, eyes on it and feedback, and, you know, make sure we have the right guardrails in place to make sure that it doesn't make the world an unsafe place very quickly, and we don't have the speed to fix it. So that, I think it was a big realization. If we took it and we pointed to, I mean, a lot of organizations are still using applications that were built in the 90s. Banks still have, you know, mainframes that are still operating, and we're becoming
There's
this
a lot of COBOL out there still. Yep.
That's where I started. I'm a COBOL programmer. That's where I started my background. And you know, maybe there's still work for me in the future at some point.
Well, it's sort of interesting because it goes back to your original point of, is, you know, are there jobs for people? And I think that there are certainly jobs for, because, you know, somebody might say, well, just let the AI actually fix it. Well, AI is quite good at JavaScript. It's quite good at Python. It's quite good at Rust. But it's apparently not so good at writing machine code, in part because it wasn't trained on Latin. We just don't have the level. Think of the sheer volume of Python code we have to train AI on versus the machine code. So, and COBOL, I suspect. So there's certainly, for anything that's legacy, there's obviously there's place for people. We need that kind of insight. And I do think that going forward, we've seen this throughout human history. Jobs disappear and new jobs come.
Yep.
Somehow, as entities, as a species, we always find a way to keep ourselves busy and doing things. And I don't think is going to shift, millennia of how we always find a new thing to do. Also, with AI, there's going to be a lot of new jobs related to all the care and feeding of AI and the training of AI. So some jobs will go away.
I had some job. We have always had this evolution through times. I mean, the jobs that we're doing today didn't exist 60 years ago.
Right.
I mean, that's what we have to look at. And a lot of people's jobs that they're doing today didn't exist in the previous generation. There's trades that have been around for a long time, and those tend to stick because they're not easy to replicate in machines and bots. And maybe we'll get there at some point, but we've always had to evolve through different industrial revolutions to find new things to keep us busy and to learn new skills. I think, though, is one of the things that I've seen is that the speed that we have to change jobs is faster now as well.
Yeah.
Where I'm finding that probably in my career, I probably had 3 or 4 different roles because I've had to keep retraining in order to stay relevant.
Yes.
And also to progress my career as well. I didn't want to stick doing the one thing, and I looked at what's the next evolution. We're always retraining, but I think that speed is accelerating. Every time we replace our phone, we'll probably have a new career.
Yeah.
And we're constant learners over time. We'll just be learning new things to stay relevant and to keep busy and keep us focused because, our minds, we need something to do and we need something to keep us active.
That's right. Yeah, we got it. What is that? Hercule Poirot says, if you don't use the little gray cells, they rust.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it's an amazing kind of direction, and I think that we will, there will be lots of new jobs going forward. To be, people will be learning, becoming data analysts and trainers, and we'll becoming observers. We're starting to watch these algorithms fight and argue, which I've had a lot of fun doing with watching agents fighting agents.
Or Reddit, there's every now and then I'll be in a subreddit where it's like it was clearly an AI posted it, and then AI is mostly interacting with it, and you just read it, and you're like I thought Maltbook it was interesting that who was it, Meta? So who bought Maltbook? I forget. But I was like, we didn't need Maltbook. We've got a lot of subreddits where it's already. Just AI chat with AI.
But that was more of it was an AI only.
Right, that's true.
Reddit's a mixture of humans plus AI.
Some human DNA.
So there's some involvement and overlap, which is always funny. But that was like which is always funny now when you're joining meetings and online meetings. It's like, are you a bot? Now there's a bot check, and then Modbot was like, are you human? Like, you're not allowed on if you're human. So there's not separate. Yeah, it's a separation of communities going different directions. So it's always funny, and that's sometimes the comical side of things. It always keeps us entertained at some of those decisions as well.
Yeah, well, and the conversations, if you looked at Maltbook, it was funny because if you had been trained on, Reddit and Substack and other places where humans get together and share Medium, and you could kind of understand it. A lot of what was being posted were things that humans do post. It was predicting what was most likely to say, and it just felt really weird for it to be coming from an AI. And it does start to feel. I understand why people are like, are these sentient? Are they thinking on their, because it comes out with stuff that does feel so human that it can be easy to question.
I think one of the things you brought up was really important as well, is that, in the last couple of years, the learning part, we've been very good at understanding about how to do prompt engineering, looking at the guardrails, looking at the, how to interact. So prompt has been a massive skill set that we've had to do. And I think you're also brought up another good point, is that is a lot of the AI models, they're now starting to learn the context. Because I think, when you talked about hash, having breakfast and honeypots and IPs and stuff, all of that, you need to have the context. And I think that's the next generation that we're going through right now, is that it's no longer just about understanding the right prompt, because that was great for things like language translation or math-based,
right.
The nine times tables, is that now we start to understand, if we start training them on context aware, then you understand about where does that 9 times table apply? Why, I would, against one of the things I always use in a lot of my metaphors is that I'm going outside, I need a jacket. And the question is that what's the context? Why do I need a jacket? I have to look at all the other
Right.
sensors and parameters. Is it raining? Is it cold? Is it windy?
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, what geographic location? What's the forecast? Why is that person making? So you have to think about all of those different kind of perspectives, boundaries, environments, reasoning, to make sure they understand the context. And that's what's really, I think the models are now kind of starting to have that as part of the training model is the environmental understanding about what's the situation awareness. I think with the mythos so that's the concern is that once it gets released, it will start finding its way around by itself, and we will just lose control. So maybe there's reasoning for keeping it a bit slower pace.
Well, and there's also, I mean, there's the model itself, which when it's
Mm.
done with training, it's the
Mhm.
weights and biases are closed. It can't learn. The model itself can't
Mhm.
learn when it's not in learning mode, when
Yeah.
the weights are closed. But there's a lot of work going on with these agent harnesses. So even
Mhm.
as we may not think, when you hear of agentic, you think of like this little worker bee
Yeah.
going out and doing something on your behalf. But all LLMs are wrapped with some kind of the software.
Mhm.
So even when we're working with Claude or we're working with Copilot, there's an agent harness
Mhm.
around it.
Mhm.
There's software around it. That's where the regular expression for sentiment analysis was coming from. It was in the harness that's around it. So I think too, to your point, that
Mhm.
we're getting smarter about because each time you go to the LLM, it's like
Mhm.
it doesn't remember. Like the weights are frozen
Yeah.
because it's data training. The context and the memory
Mhm.
around it within the harness, I think we're
Mhm.
getting also much more sophisticated about what we remember, what we don't. And you mentioned skills, and I think
Yeah.
skills are interesting. There are these markdown files that can have code in them, but a lot of what the skills are, basically,
Mhm.
if you go and you read a skill, it's context to send to the LLM on behalf of that particular thing
Mhm.
that you're trying to do. So there are these sort of pre-canned prompts, complex prompts that have been tested to know that that's going to lead
Mhm.
the LLM to give you the inference that you want for what you're trying to accomplish. So I think that as we look at all of this work that's going on, it's very clear. And again, this is why I think humans, we have jobs for forever. It's very clear that smart humans are figuring out how we take advantage,
Mhm.
how we use these systems in a way that's going to help us. I hate the term force multiplier, but
Yeah.
help us to be better at what we do and how we use them more effectively.
I
So
just
yeah,
laughed.
I think it's
I laughed at a friend. Dave has been talking about agentic AI agents being almost like gremlins, where you add water and they multiply, and that's ultimately what we're faced with. Is that so we will start off with a few, and we're
yeah.
going to add data, which is the accelerate, and those things will they'll just multiply. The question is, can we make sure we stay in control?
I mean, that's actually why I'm at the company I'm at, because like that's it, is we need a control plane for this. Because what's interesting about agent behavior is that when you say go do this, right, it's the system's been trained to make that happen, right? It doesn't think about, good and bad and, should I be doing that the way that humans
Mhm.
do? And I mean, there was I don't know if it was Anthropic or OpenAI, but one
Mhm.
of the Frontier Model Labs came out with it. They were watching, they sort of set this agent out with like, no matter what, get this done, right? So the agent, was getting stymied for things like, well, it couldn't log into this system. And so another agent had access to that system, but couldn't get the other agent the password. So it actually hid it in a picture. So use steganography to
Yes.
hide that password and get that out to the other, which again, a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh my God, these gremlins are, they're like, we fed them after midnight and they're going to, but I think it's just more about, let's understand how that
Mhm.
technology works and that we have created software that, is now quite good at getting stuff done and
Mhm.
knows the ways around it. So this is all the more reason to train it responsibly, put safety in the harness, and also have, controls like a control plane so that if this stuff starts to go off the rails, not even because it's trying to be bad, but because it's trying to, TCB,
It's
like
trying to
that we
do
can say,
it's doing what it was told to do.
yeah,
And
we can,
no
we say,
matter what.
okay, but not that. Yeah,
So not using that method. If you have problems,
right.
come back to the observer, and we will help you.
Yeah,
Don't try to get around the safety net that we've set out.
exactly.
So, which always kind
Yeah.
of we always think of the MCPs as kind of the gateway, the control plane being there as well. And I find it. I've got to the point where I was always wondering, should I create a single or a few agents and have them become bigger digital versions of me, but I'm starting to find this better approach to keep it microservices that are very focused at doing singular things and then having them work together in a swarm, but with controls. That
Yes.
becomes much more easier to maintain and control, and allows you to also stop it from getting out of hand as well by having them very focused. Because you can, what I find is I've always had the conversation. A friend of mine, we did an episode on AI last year. We talked about using AI for coding, and I always find that when I did a lot of porting of my old code from years ago to Python, I ended up finding that the code bloated. It went from 150 lines to 1,500, and the reason why is I wasn't good at telling it what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And by
Yeah.
saying, I
Yeah.
don't want you to do all of these error
Yep.
handling exceptions and stuff. So it really gets into making sure we actually understand about how to keep it lean and how to keep
Yeah.
it focused. And if you have that, if it's very specific task focused, then it will do it really well. And if you give it these big goals, it's gonna find ways around your limitations in order to achieve, because it's very focused on those outcomes.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And also when it's a sort of a tight goal, right? You know what's wrong, what you don't want
Yeah.
it to do. And I think you're right. And I think it's the same with, I think we're going to find more and more people training their own smaller models. The frontier models are amazing. And I think everybody sort of partly wants to just like, can't I just do it all with that. But I do think that we'll find not just chopping the goals and the tasks per agent smaller and smaller so that we have more control over it, but also we'll see a lot of companies, I think, going back to training their own models and using their own data sets because, for certain purpose fit, it's very, everybody who's used one of the frontier models has had some sort of experience with confabulation, hallucination, even just as much as like, it's not great at knowing what day it is. We know how to do that computationally, programmatically, like really accurately and very, very easily, but asking inference to do it, not exactly the right thing.
times and
Yeah.
what do you think? It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think
especially
people
if
are
you're
starting
crossing
to
time
realize
zones,
that.
it's kind of like, oh, where are you?
Oh yeah, that's true.
So a question it's been really intriguing and insightful for me. How do you stay up to date? Where do you get your knowledge from? Especially when we're sitting on the frontier, of technology and creating it, not just using it, but really creating how people are going to use it in the future. How do you stay up to date? What's the knowledge? Where do you go to for information? There's conferences, books that you've read, mentors that you have. What's the way that you stay informed and knowledgeable?
Well, because I'm like, eating the dog food, whatever, living, doing my own yoga. I actually do have a setup within both ChatGPT and Claude. One's in Claude Cowork of give me an AI morning brief. So I actually have both the AI. I train them, I tune them to get better info. There's been like a lot of learning with that. I have to say that still, even so, I've got both of them. I hope someday they're going to be better than the very smart, interesting people I follow on LinkedIn, which is where I really get some of the latest, greatest, most interesting info. But I am continuing to work every morning trying to tune my AI briefing bots to go out and be better than the humans. Right now, a great curated set of folks on LinkedIn, I think is really good. Follow who's smart and interested in this. They're going to be posting about what's going on, in addition to maybe using your AI to do the searches.
Yeah.
I'm also involved, very lucky to be involved with like the OWASP Gen AI project.
Yep.
Lots of smart people having lots of smart discussions. There's a CSA CISO group. Also, CSA is doing a lot of work in this. So I think also looking at some of these big community projects, because there's a lot of activity and good knowledge getting shared in there too.
Absolutely fantastic. And you're also involved in the Women in Cybersecurity as well, because we definitely need more amazing people like you with your background in the industry, and I believe that's an area that you're working into to make sure that there's a path for awesome women to get into the industry as well.
Yes. Yeah. And I say it's not just making sure that, we don't pull the ladder up behind us, but like, that's not enough. We got to build the stairs so that it's going to be easy for all cohorts that may not have the same opportunities to make sure that we give that. Because again, people are worried about losing their jobs, but also we need a lot of smart people in a lot of different areas and disciplines. The attackers asymmetrically, as we look at, you said it earlier, what can be used for good can be used for bad. We're going to need a lot more people on the defense side and thinking through these really tough, complex problems. So yes, having communities like Women in Cybersecurity, WESIS, to help people find each other, find networking, find
Mhm.
opportunities, find learning paths, I think is absolutely critical for defense going
Yeah,
forward.
fantastic, absolutely. And if the audience has questions that they want to come to you later, what's the best way to contact you? I'm assuming
I'm on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, Diana
well,
Kelley, LinkedIn.
well, I'll make sure that we'll add the link to the show notes, so it makes it much easier for everyone to find. It's been fantastic. This is I missed you at RSA conference, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
we'll
You
definitely
were
make
so
sure that
busy. We were so busy. Yeah.
it is. It's one of those events that even when you do meet people, it's like I was passing by, saw Gary Hyslop. I was like for 5 seconds on the street. So you're passing by, you're seeing everyone. Sometimes you don't get enough time sometimes to enjoy and have a good conversation. So we definitely have to make that happen at Black Hat, I believe.
We do. We have to have at least the hug. It's I've had done this a few RSAs with Itai Mayor. I absolutely love him. And it's like, for some reason, we can't have time to see each other, but we have 30 seconds. We find each other and there's a big hug. And, it's like that
Absolutely.
at least you've had
We'll
connection.
make sure it
Yeah.
happens next time. So it's been awesome having you on, and very insightful, very educational, and amazing that your journey and what you're doing again to make the world a safer place, and everything you do is outstanding. And thank you again for being you and everything you contribute.
Thank you.
So
Thank
for
you.
everyone, this is the Security by Default podcast. Again, bringing you insights, interesting conversations, hopefully lessons for you to go back and play around in your day, and maybe we'll play around with Claude, look at GPT models, and go and reading and learning, going back to some of the early concepts of the ELIZA models, and really understanding about what was the reasons they were made, what was the contributions that we're doing, and really how it's evolved, and some of those pinnacle moments throughout those years. So tune in every 2 weeks for new episodes. Subscribe, share, reach out to me if you have questions or topics you want in the future. But again, everyone, take care, stay safe. Until next time, thank you.